The stage lights hadn't even warmed up before the shock hit them like a punch to the chest. A rope, dead center, split the Columbia, South Carolina auditorium in two. One side black, the other white. A physical line drawn in a world already full of invisible ones. It wasn't 1952. It was years into their fame. And Otis Williams, standing beside David Ruffin, Eddie Kendricks, Paul Williams, and Melvin Franklin, could hardly believe it. That moment, raw and unforgettable, would etch itself into his soul forever. Yet he said nothing. Not until now. At 82, Otis has finally decided to speak, to peel back the velvet curtain and let the truth shine through. Decades after the final note faded into history. And what a history it is. Otis Miles Jr., the quiet boy from Texarkana who became Otis Williams, didn't stumble into music. He ran headlong into it, with Detroit's pulse beating under his feet. In the thick of the Great Migration, Detroit was a storm of talent, and Otis dove straight in. He didn't have family connections. He didn't have money. What he had was hunger and a voice that refused to be silenced. But then came a twist of fate, one that would send chills through any dreamer's spine. In a dimly lit community center, Otis's group lit up the stage, and among the crowd sat a man whose name would become legend, Berry Gordy. With a simple card and the words, "Call me," Gordy flipped Otis's world upside down. That was the moment that birthed the Temptations. Not just a band, but a movement. They were elegance and electricity. Their harmonies had the precision of diamonds cutting through glass. Their suits shimmered, their dance moves snapped like poetry in motion. But that wasn't the whole story. Behind the gold records and screams of fans were long nights of bitterness, of battles waged in silence and sometimes in rage. And no battle was more intense than the one between Otis and David Ruffin. David, the voice behind some of their most iconic tracks, was a star burning too hot to contain. His charisma was magnetic, his talent beyond measure, but his unpredictability threatened to pull them all under. Still, they endured. And as their songs crossed racial and cultural lines, their biggest test wasn't in the studio. It was in places like Columbia. That rope, splitting the crowd, wasn't just an insult. It was a challenge, and they rose to it. Their voices became defiance, their melodies resistance, their unity a message that no rope could divide. Fast forward to today, and Otis stands as the last original member. The stories he tells aren't just reflections, they're revelations. And in his voice is the weight of a journey most will never fully understand. From Detroit's back streets to the heights of Motown glory, his path was paved with sacrifice. He didn't just witness history, he helped write it. Otis didn't merely chase fame, he built a legacy. His financial rise, though modest by today's celebrity standards, was meticulous. He never fell into the glitz and glam trap that devoured so many others. Over the years, he invested smartly. Modest real estate holdings in Detroit and Atlanta. Diversified business interests including a stake in a licensing company that manages the Temptations' intellectual property, and long-term royalties that continue to flow. His luxury was understated, favoring classic Cadillacs and an occasional Mercedes-Benz S-Class over supercars. His timepieces? A refined Rolex Oyster Perpetual, and an Audemars Piguet gifted by a fellow Motown artist. Nothing flashy, just legacy pieces, like the man himself. He's also had solid insurance coverage, both personal and business. Health coverage through SAG-AFTRA, insurance on his music catalog through Lloyd's of London, and estate planning that includes trusts for his children. Unlike many of his peers, Otis planned for the long game. One of the financial lessons he often shares in interviews is simple but powerful. Make sure your art works for you long after you're gone. That advice hits even harder now, as we watch generation after generation of stars rise and fall. Otis survived not just because of talent, but because of clarity. He saw the traps early, the fast money, the false friends, the fleeting trends, and stepped around them. But he didn't do it alone. His early success was deeply intertwined with the energy of others: David, Eddie, Paul, and Melvin, each with their brilliance and burdens. When Paul's health declined and Melvin's voice began to fade, Otis stayed. When egos exploded and the lineup shifted, Otis stayed. He became the anchor, the one voice steady through the chaos. Even at 82, Otis hasn't faded into the background. He continues to tour with a new generation of Temptations, keeping the music alive. And with this latest reveal, finally speaking about that segregated performance and other long-buried truths, he's proving that his voice still matters, still commands, still teaches. There's a certain power in a man who waited until the world quieted to speak. And when Otis speaks now, the world leans in. Looking back, what made the Temptations great wasn't just their music. It was their resilience, their audacity to dream in a world that often told them not to, their ability to unite when everything around them was breaking apart, their elegance in the face of adversity, their fire even when surrounded by cold indifference. Otis Williams is more than a musician. He's a blueprint for how to rise, how to endure, and how to finish strong. He never chased headlines, but now, with one revelation, he's made us all stop and listen again. The spotlight has returned, not for fame, not for ego, but for truth. And for those who dream of longevity in an industry that forgets fast and forgives slowly, Otis's life offers a masterclass. Legacy isn't built in the moment. It's built in the staying, in the surviving, in the singing, even when no one's clapping. He never imagined that a spontaneous gig at a humble community center would plant the seed for a legacy that would redefine soul music forever. Back then, it wasn't about fame or money. It was about channeling raw emotion into harmony, echoing the gospel sounds he had grown up with, and blending them with the pulsing rhythms of Detroit's streets. It was during one of these electrifying performances at St. Stephen's Community Center that a moment of destiny unfolded. The Miracles had just wrapped up a set, riding high from their first major hit, when Barry Gordy, already a quiet storm in the industry, slipped him a business card near the restroom. A single glance, a brief exchange of words, and a promise that if things ever turned sour with his management, Gordy would be waiting. They all came together, tried calling themselves the Elgins, only to discover that name was already taken. The new name, the Temptations, was simple, magnetic, and perfect. They didn't just form a group. They birthed a new genre-bending force in music, where gospel met R&B and emotion met elegance. Smokey Robinson quickly became a driving force behind their early success, crafting iconic tracks like The Way You Do the Things You Do, My Girl, and It's Growing. These weren't just hits. They were time capsules of soul, capturing an era that still vibrates through speakers today. But as their fame soared, so did the pressure. The lineup constantly changed, and behind the scenes, tensions simmered. When David Ruffin joined in 1963, the group's chemistry shifted again. His raspy urgency and on-stage charisma injected fire into their evolving sound. Their musical identity matured. Ruffin helped lead them through hits that weren't just danceable. They were profound. Songs like Cloud 9 and Ball of Confusion weren't just catchy. They were commentaries on the world unraveling outside the studio doors. This was a group refusing to stand still. Yet every reinvention brought growing pains. Eddie Kendricks left in 1971 to pursue a solo path. Paul Williams, once the emotional core of the group, was losing a battle with his health and inner demons. His absence cast a shadow that would never truly lift. Williams's passing in 1973 shattered the group. They lost not just a voice, but a brother. The road ahead suddenly felt heavier. but he didn't walk away. While many bands from that era cracked under fame's weight, he held steady, sometimes in the background but always present. His deep baritone wasn't often front and center, but it was the glue, the backbone, the reason the Temptations never fully lost their way. His role wasn't glamorous, but it was essential. When other voices soared, he grounded them. And in tracks like I'm Gonna Make You Love Me with Diana Ross or Masterpiece, his spoken intros gave the music depth and drama. You didn't just hear the songs, you felt them. Through the late 70s, as disco took over and Motown lost some of its golden shimmer, the group struggled to keep their relevance. The Philly soul sound didn't quite fit them, and internal disagreements threatened to derail their purpose. But again, he held firm. He saw their name as sacred, too sacred to let fade. Then came Rick James, funk royalty, a superstar with a wild streak who saw something timeless in the Temptations. Their 1982 collaboration, Standing on the Top, gave them new wings. Then came the Motown 25th Anniversary Special, an explosive television event that reignited public passion. As Michael Jackson moonwalked into history, the Temptations squared off in a legendary face-off with the Four Tops, reminding everyone who helped lay the foundation of modern soul. The comeback was real. Hits like Treat Her Like a Lady and Stay proved they could evolve with the times, and yet never lose that signature spark. While newer artists came and went, the Temptations endured, largely because of his unwavering leadership. It wasn't always smooth. Tensions flared, egos clashed, but every time the group risked losing its way, he anchored them. He once said in an interview that while many singers chased the spotlight, he chased stability. And that's exactly what he gave. As the quiet force behind every album, every tour, and every painful reinvention, he shaped the Temptations' identity across decades. With fellow member Melvin Franklin, they once promised each other to never abandon the group, no matter the storms. And even after Melvin's passing in 1995, he continued carrying that torch, alone but unbroken. Today, at 81 years old, Otis Williams remains the last original member still performing under the Temptations' name. It's a staggering legacy, not just for its length, but for its impact. Every album, yes, including their most recent in 2022, bears his mark. His financial trajectory is a story of persistence. While other Motown legends saw explosive rises and steep falls, Otis built gradually. His current estimated net worth stands near $10 million. But his wealth isn't just monetary, it's generational influence. He's also no stranger to a taste of the finer life. Over the decades, Otis has invested in a modest but meaningful real estate portfolio. His primary home in California, nestled in the San Fernando Valley, carries a relaxed elegance. Valued at over $2.5 million. The property features a music studio, a home library filled with soul vinyls, and a landscaped backyard where memories are constantly being made. He owns a Mercedes-Benz S-Class, a nod to timeless design, and a vintage Cadillac once gifted by Berry Gordy, now fully restored. His watch collection includes a few gems, a Rolex Day-Date with a diamond bezel, and a limited edition Omega Seamaster gifted by fans during a 50th anniversary tour. Private jets? Not really his style. He prefers commercial flights, often flying first class but still traveling with his signature humility. But what's more valuable than the properties or the cars is the legacy he's curated. In a world that often discards its legends too soon, Otis Williams stands tall as a living monument to perseverance. Through heartbreak, success, and constant reinvention, he has proven that true greatness isn't about always being in the spotlight. It's about refusing to let that spotlight die. But before this personal devastation, Otis had already been through emotional turbulence. His marriage to Josephine Rogers began in 1961. The same year, the Temptations were formed, but couldn't withstand the pressure of his meteoric rise. They divorced just 3 years later, and then came Patti LaBelle, the voice, the icon, and the woman he thought he might build a future with. Their engagement burned bright, but ended when he asked her to abandon her music dreams and move to Detroit. Patti couldn't choose love over purpose. She returned the ring and chose the mic. That decision became a defining one, not just for her, but for both of them. Sometimes love and ambition collide in ways that no chorus can resolve. Then came his marriage to Ann Kane in 1967, who had once been a housekeeper for Ike and Tina Turner. A small footnote in her past that hinted at how entwined these music legends truly were. By 1973, even that marriage ended. His third union, to Arliata Goldie Williams in 1983, brought temporary stability and a new family member, stepdaughter Elin Carter, who would later grace the pages of Playboy and walk her own path through fame. Behind the glitter of gold records, however, came demands that began to fracture the Temptations' brotherhood. He asked for mink-lined limousines and private privileges that set him apart from the group. The real turning point? When Motown crowned Diana Ross by renaming the Supremes in her honor, he wanted the same: David Ruffin and the Temptations. It was more than ambition. It was ego, and it backfired. Unity turned into discord. But it was Ruffin's shocking dissent that truly splintered the group. Missing rehearsals, skipping performances, and even requesting full financial disclosures from the group only added fuel to the growing fire. The final blow came when he ditched a Cleveland concert to see his new flame, Barbara Gail Martin. The next day, he was out. Dennis Edwards stepped in, but Ruffin couldn't stay away. He crashed Edwards' debut performance and snatched the mic, belting out "Ain't Too Proud to Beg" in a stunning act of defiance. It was unforgettable, it was chaotic, and it was the beginning of a dangerous spiral. He didn't stop. Ruffin sneaked into shows, disrupted performances, and pushed the band to the brink. There were whispers of letting Edwards go and bringing Ruffin back, especially when some members softened. But Ruffin's unreliability sealed his fate. He missed the very event meant to mark his comeback. That misstep killed the dream. Then came the courtroom battles. In October 1968, Ruffin sued Motown to end his contract. The label sued back, has built her own wealth through television, branding deals, and real estate. Her investments in Florida properties have grown her net worth to an estimated $2 million. She also owns a private Gulfstream G200 jet, proof that her success wasn't just inherited, but earned. David Ruffin, in contrast, suffered from financial mismanagement throughout his life. At his peak, his net worth was estimated around $2 million, but legal troubles, addiction, and inconsistent touring drained his fortune. He owned a modest home in Philadelphia and drove a Lincoln Continental, once a status symbol, now a relic of a man who lost more than he gained. From their journeys, one lesson is clear: fame without financial wisdom is fleeting. Otis's longevity is rooted in discipline. He diversified, planned for downturns, and protected his earnings. Ruffin's downfall reveals how ego and recklessness can destroy even the most gifted. In the end, the Temptations were more than a band. They were a microcosm of everything that's beautiful and brutal about fame. And as we look back at their triumphs, betrayals, and legacies, one can't help but wonder, how much of their pain was the price of their greatness? If you've ever found yourself humming one of their hits, remember, behind every perfect harmony, there was a story filled with noise. What a wild, soulful journey. Love, loss, luxury, and legacy, all wrapped into one epic Temptations tale. If this rocked your world, don't forget to like, drop your thoughts below, and hit that subscribe button for more behind-the-scenes bombshells. We've got more music legends and shocking revelations coming your way soon. Until then, just remember, styles fade, but soul is forever.